As we all know, the NBA season and playoffs are just a little over 3 weeks away, and uncertainty still rises upon everyone as to if the season is confirmed to start, and if it can keep everybody safe in the process. But assuming that the NBA playoffs do resume, most teams will be affected in terms of their roster depth, with players continuing to opt out of playing in Orlando. For example, we have Victor Oladipo of the Indiana Pacers, Trevor Ariza of the Portland Trailblazers, Davis Bertans of the Washington Wizards, etc. With this in mind, players are going to be further relied on teams to perform in Orlando, Florida in order to be successful. With that said, there are many X factors for each team to be in order to be successful, and I'll be discussing about them today. Hey everyone, DC NBA Junkie here, and today I'll be discussing an important X factor from each NBA team. Let's get to it. But before I begin, feel free to subscribe, like the video, and comment below which X factor player do you think can contribute most to their team in terms of success. Now, without further ado, let's take a look into the X factor of each NBA team. Roll the intro.
You got the best advice, but I won't call. No way. I know I'm grown, so I do not need y'all. I got it. And if I get locked on my face of law, oh yeah, you fix it.
Alright, beginning in Philadelphia with the 76ers, I think the X factor player for them is Tobias Harris, because I know that I'm not going to put Ben Simmons or Joel Embiid, and I'm not going to put someone like Al Horford, especially since they're relying on him more for his defense, and I know that he can be counted on defensively. But I think in terms of playoffs and who's going to be the best for them, Tobias Harris is going to be a crucial player for them. He's a scorer, and his stats have been dropping offensively, so they're going to need his production to be at the peak performer in order for them to be considered a tough opponent in the NBA playoffs. Next, I'm going to go into the Milwaukee Bucks, and for them, I have Chris Middleton. Last season, he had a little bit of a rougher, some playoff stats. I mean, compared to his regular season stats of plus 20 points per game, he dropped in the playoffs to below 20 points per game, and he took a dip in points, but the Bucks are going to need his scoring, especially if Giannis Antetokounmpo is being guarded heavily. They're going to need to look to him and to count on him in order for them to go far in the playoffs. And I think they will go far, in my opinion, but Chris Middleton is the foundation, one of the foundation pieces in order for them to reach that expectation. For the Boston Celtics, I have Jaylen Brown, because I feel that Jason Tatum and Kemba Walker are locks in terms of they will play good and they're going to be good performers. I believe in Jason Tatum. He's having a good rise right now. And Kemba Walker, he's been in the league for a long time, and he's a multiple-time All-Star. I know he hasn't had a lot of All-Star experience, but I believe in him. So for Jaylen Brown, I would just like to see his stats carry over into the playoffs, averaging 20 points per game, fair assists and rebounding numbers. So I think Jaylen Brown is the X factor for the Boston Celtics, especially since Gordon Hayward is announced that if they're still playing by the time he's expecting a child, then he will not. He will leave the bubble. For the Los Angeles Clippers, I have Marcus Morris Sr. Now, I probably should be saying like Paul George, but I think those are guys I can count on for at least scoring purposes, and I think those injuries are going to heal them. But in terms of an X factor, I think Marcus Morris makes more sense here, because he was struggling with the Clippers. He was struggling to find his groove in the big games offensively, and even just being on the team in general. So I think his contributions in terms of them improving are going to be drastically important for this team. For the Memphis Grizzlies, I have Ja Morant. For this team, they're just inexperienced, so I just decided I'm going to pick the number one guy, because a team like this needs their leader to step up. The leader is the X factor. If he's not doing well, this team is most likely not going to either make the playoffs. I mean, to go far in the playoffs, they're going to need Ja Morant to be their leader and just be their best player that he can be. So that's going to be it for the Memphis Grizzlies right there. For the Miami Heat, I have Andre Iguodala. He was a former Finals MVP, So that's one of the biggest reasons they traded for him from the Memphis Grizzlies. His defensive presence is great, and I think in terms of this team, I know that their roster is really well known for being very deep, but Andre Iguodala was a piece that they brought in, and he didn't get a lot of time to really play some NBA basketball again after being out for a long time. But I think that he's going to be the certain X factor in terms of defensively and for them to go far in the NBA playoffs. For the Utah Jazz, this is a very confusing one for me. I'm just going to go with Jordan Clarkson. The team is just messed up and a little confusing. I don't really have a lot of hope for them in the playoffs, especially with Bojan Bogdanovic out. He's because of his injury. So I think Clarkson, in terms of making up some of Bogdanovic's scoring, is going to be very important. But other than that, I really don't know what to say. So that's for the Utah Jazz. I think Jordan Clarkson is their best bet. For the Sacramento Kings, I'm going to take Harrison Barnes. This seems also weak, and I don't really know if they're going to make the playoffs, and I don't really have big hopes for them. But in terms of I know that I believe in De'Aaron Fox's ability to be a good player, but in terms of a guy alongside Fox and Hield offensively, he's a great player, and he is an NBA champion, so he knows he's been in the big stage in the playoffs. I mean, potentially going for the playoffs right now. So the Kings are really in desperation mode for anybody to step up and be a contributor on this team, for a leader and a producer who I think that Harrison Barnes could be for them. For the Los Angeles Lakers, I'm going to go with Kyle Kuzma here. People might expect me to say like J.R. Smith, Dion Waiters, somebody who's already on this team, who's like a guard to kind of fill in Bradley's role. But to be honest, it's hard to believe I'm even saying this considering his immaturity and just being a goofy guy on his Instagram and TikToks. But Kuzma's scoring is going to be really needed for this Los Angeles Lakers team, especially with the loss of Avery Bradley. I know defensively, I don't know who's going to take part of Avery Bradley's not being there and his absence, but I think Kuzma is going to need to step up. And I'm saying Kuzma because he's proven it. His first 2 years, he was a scorer. He did it. But now that he's been pretty disappointing this year, people haven't seen him in the same light. For the Orlando Magic, I'm going to go with Aaron Gordon. I don't really have a lot of hope for this team. I don't think many do. But in terms of just a solid player next to Vucevic and Markelle Fultz, I think his performance has been really strong, especially it's been improving even in a poor the Magic are really well known for poor development. Victor Oladipo leaves and becomes a really good player. Serge Ibaka becomes an impactful player on a championship team when he leaves. And like Mo Bamba, a lot of players have been infected by Magic's development. So his performance will help increase depth, but I don't really have much hope for the Orlando Magic. For the Dallas Mavericks, I'm going to go with Tim Hardaway. I know Luka's a superstar, and I know that Kristaps Porzingis will be a good player, but in terms of a guy who can provide further production off the bench, a guy who has been very inconsistent at times, I think Tim Hardaway is a guy who could put up 18 points per game, throughout the season. So in these playoffs, if he can put up sufficient points per game numbers and maybe just be something on the defensive end, I think that the Dallas Mavericks can have a pretty good shot in the NBA playoffs, especially in a tight Western Conference. For the Brooklyn Nets, I'm just going to say it. There's nobody. I'm not picking any X factor. Let's be honest. Every single one of their players that is significant is not playing. Kyrie's just not playing because he's not playing. Kevin Durant, he had COVID and his injury. I believe Claxton's even sitting out. Dinwiddie is sitting out. He got COVID, and DeAndre Jordan. So every significant player on this team is basically out, other than Karis LeVert and a couple other players. But I'm just not going to pick anybody for the Brooklyn Nets. For the Denver Nuggets, I have Michael Porter Jr. His development throughout this season, coming in for the first time in his career, has been very impressive to see. I saw he was a very mature player, and he looked, as he progressed throughout his playing time on the Nuggets, he was scoring better. And I think in these playoffs for the Nuggets especially, his scoring is going to be very important because offensively they're a great team, but his additional scoring at the three is going to be something they've been missing a long time. And I think if they bring this in, they could be a potential title threat. Honestly, I believe so. For the Indiana Pacers, I'm picking Jeremy Lamb, and simply it's because Oladipo is not playing because of his injury. It's because of precautions for his injury. If Jeremy Lamb, assuming he plays, he's going to need to step up for Oladipo's fill in his role a little bit. And I think in terms of just being anything to what they were going to be with Oladipo, Jeremy Lamb's just going to have to fill in offensively. And I know he's not that good defensively, but he's just going to need to take a step in his game. But I don't really have a lot of faith in the Indiana Pacers, to be honest, without Oladipo. For the New Orleans Pelicans, I'm going to take Lonzo Ball because I believe in Ingram, and this team is young, so there's a lot of concerns there with just trying to get into the playoffs. But they have one of the easier schedules, and I just think in the playoffs, if they make it, Zoe needs to stay consistent for the team because he's been very strong. When he's playing good, he's averaging like 18 a game, 17 a game, around there, and he's getting like 8 assists a game. He's doing everything for this team. He's getting rebounds, he's scoring, and he's getting assists. His jumper's been looking a lot better this year, and I think with this young team and his defensive presence and leadership, it's going to be very important, especially with even his scoring production to being a little bit more improved this year. The Toronto Raptors, I'm going to take OG Anunoby. Obviously, Kawhi Leonard is not present with this team, and they need the two-way presence from anybody, but specifically OG Anunoby is going to be able to bring that two-way presence that they, he's brought the two-way presence, but in these playoffs, this game is going to serve best if his two-way game is doing well and this team thrives off his performance. For the Houston Rockets, I'm going to go with Eric Gordon. It could have been him or Covington. Really anybody who's like a shooter on this team that's kind of like adding on to Harden and Westbrook. I see him as one of the better producers on this team, being more consistent. I know that he's been a little inconsistent as of this year, but I think that's mainly due to, trying to figure out their groove. Transitioning now to PJ Tucker at the 5 is a little still interesting to me, but I think that scoring alongside James Harden and Russell Westbrook is needed, and that's why they brought Covington in, and they have Eric Gordon there. They signed him because he can score, and I think that he's an X factor for that reason. For the San Antonio Spurs, I was going to put none, but they have players, so I'm just going to say DeJounte Murray. They don't really have much hope either. There's no chance they make the playoffs, but especially with Aldridge not playing in these resumption, but Murray is a factor for this team if he can do well defensively and if he can do something offensively. Okay, for these, I have 4 more teams left. For the Phoenix Suns, I'm going to go with DeAndre Ayton. Once again, this is another Western Conference team that really doesn't have a big shot, but they do because they are they're the Phoenix Suns. I think there's a piece, but without Kelly Oubre, and I know that Devin Booker will score the basketball, he's good for that. DeAndre Ayton missed a lot of games, so he really only played maybe less than half a regular season. So, just having him back in his interior presence, offensively and defensively, is just gonna have to be on point, like stellar performance from him in order for them to have the chance to even make the playoffs. For me, it's a concerning team because their bench is one of the worst benches in the league. So, once again, I'm just gonna go with DeAndre Ayton here. For the Oklahoma City Thunder, I'm going to go with Danilo Gallinari. I was going to go put Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, but in terms of I think I count on him and Chris Paul to be good playoff performers. Just my thing, especially since Shai did play last year. I know it wasn't significant, but he did get some experience. He has a small playoff resume, Danilo Gallinari, with 3 years, but in the 18-19 season last year, he did average basically 20 points per game in those few games that they played. So he's a scorer, I know that, and his scoring production and his height in general, just to play the 4, stretch 4 almost, because he's 6'10", is going to be needed for this team. And I've heard interviews from him talking to people and talking about the importance of a team effort for this team. So I believe in Gallinari, and he's going to be a big X factor for their success, especially as one of the underdog teams in these NBA playoffs. For the Portland Trailblazers, I'm just going to go Jusuf Nurkic. He's coming back from over a year suffering an injury to one of his legs, I believe, in March 2019. His impact is just going to be needed inside, being a good offensive player and also being well known for being a very good defensive player when he was playing with them. They have Whiteside, but I think having Nurkic there is going to be a big X. It makes him he's the X factor in terms of if they can play for the 8th seed or get into the playoffs, because they're going to be one of the more interesting teams with Nurkic back and Zach Collins. But I'm going to go with Jusuf Nurkic for the X factor. And lastly, I'm going to go with Rui Hachimura for the Wizards. Or it could just be Bradley Beal, but I'm going to go Rui Hachimura because I believe in Bradley Beal. But this team just some slim chances for the playoffs, let alone just playoff success in general. So he'll be needed to somehow, if he somehow improves dramatically in his stats, then obviously they have a good chance, but that's not happening. He's a rookie. He's known for his defensive presence and, you know, a somewhat productive offensive player. I'm just going to put Rui Hachimura. I'm sorry. There's nothing I have to say about this one. They're not. I'm sorry. Sorry, Wizards fans. They just don't have much of a chance. But I'm going to put Rui Hachimura for the X factor for this team. And yeah, with that being said, that will be the end of today's video. If you enjoyed, feel free to subscribe, leave a like, and comment below, like I said before. Who you think, which one of these X factors, or if you have your own X factor, who do you think for that team and the X factor in general, how do you think they will impact that team? And yeah, there will also be a video up and make sure to subscribe as well. So thank you for watching and have a great day.